Hi, I'm Charlie Zhang.
And I'm Maddie Coleman, and we are
Clean Slate.
Honey, I'm talking about
Correcting club funding, lowering living costs, elevating equity and inclusion,
accountable administration, and normalizing wellness and mental health.
And we want to make SGA more permanent. We want to make sure that students can sidestep the Northeastern Shuffle.
And we want to make SGA a more accessible place by turning the culture on its head and making it a fun space for everybody.
Hey everyone, I'm Kathan Ramnath. I'm running for student body president with my friend Ramnath-Falco, who's running for vice president. We really want to get some actionable things done next year, like getting more gym space on campus, automating swipe to care, lowering material costs, getting more study space on campus, and improving relationships with NUPD. Those are just some of the things we want to do, but we really hope that you go onto the Student Hub and vote Ramnath-Falco for student body president and EVP so that we can represent you next year and help get what you want done.
Voting is open for the election of the student body president and the executive vice president, along with several other referendums on the ballot. I've sat down with representatives of both slates to talk about their policies. Voting closes on Sunday. Okay, Kathan, can you tell me a little bit about why you're running for student body president?
Yeah, so I've been part of SGA since I was a freshman year. We started during COVID, so it was remote, and then I stayed with it for the next 2 years, so I'm in third year now. I've also gotten involved in a lot of other clubs on campus too, including like NUEMS, where I discovered a passion, and now I work as an EMT. And I found like there's a lot of work that other student groups are trying to do on campus, and I really feel like SGA could be the perfect vehicle to get those things done. And we're moving in that direction, but we're still not quite there. SGA still operates like its own club, and I really want to help shift that paradigm so that instead of acting like a club, it's really more like a tool, scissors to cut through red tape, a tool that we can use to get actual things done. Like some of our goals, more squat racks, more gym on campus, open up some study space or create a list of study space, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more throughout the rest of the interview, but we really want to use SGA as a vehicle to get specific goals done versus just being like an organization on campus.
Great, so off of that, can we talk a little bit about your specific goals that you'd bring if you were to win the election, what your plan would be?
Yeah, so one of our big goals that we've just been getting a lot of student feedback about, we actually didn't come into the election period, Giovanni, my running mate, and I, with a set list of goals. We actually went to a lot of different clubs, got a lot of feedback from students too. Big thing that we've heard, people are tired of the congestion in the gyms, especially Marino. It's just gotten crazy busy. There's not enough equipment in there, and so one thing we want to do is help alleviate that. There's a referendum question on the ballot now about gym space off campus. We also want to work to get more equipment on campus, more racks, more benches, help find more space to do that. So that's like big goal number one. Another thing that we've been working on in academic fairs already is study space on campus. The library is going to be shutting down more floors. It's going to be rolling, but they're still doing more renovations. So when those floors close, like students need a place to go. One thing that we've thought of is there are empty classrooms on campus. People will see them and just kind of pop into them and go study and hope that they don't get kicked out. But the university has a list of classrooms and when they're booked across the whole university. That should be made in a user-friendly format that students have access to. So if you know, oh, this lecture hall in Dodge is open from 2 to 4 and it has 200 seats, it shouldn't be necessarily bookable, but you know that, oh, I can go there and probably find a quiet place to study that's not just the library or just like in a little hallway in Isaac. So that's like another one of our big goals. Through NUEMS, I also, and like I said, I work as an EMT part-time in the city of Newton as well. We want to increase on-campus medical care. I actually burned myself in my dorm last semester cooking, and I called UHCS, and they were like, yeah, that really sucks. That sounds really painful. We'd recommend you call somebody about that. Call somebody was it. And I was like, well, I'm calling you, the on-campus medical service, like what? So there's not they've done great leaps in terms of the mental health care on campus, and there's some great resources there. They're still not great for immediate physical or mental health care emergencies. So in conjunction with that, we want to really help improve the on-campus emergency medical response and make sure that there's people on campus ready to respond to these kind of emergencies beyond just NUPD, who might not know the best way to handle those. A couple of the other things, lowering material costs. We've already built a textbook exchange in SGA through the Academic Affairs Committee, but we want to keep that momentum going. things like Connect, where you're having to pay for a subscription service to do your homework and submit it when you're already in a class, it's not cool when it's like $150. It's ridiculous. So we're wanting to try to work with the university to find ways that we can subsidize those, mitigate those costs, and that's kind of a longer term goal. Automating swipe to care, it's another thing that we really want to do. We don't, there's a great referenda question on the ballot that's kind of a wider scope. In terms of what we want to focus on specifically in SGA, it's that automation piece, making sure that those leftover meal swipes at the end of the week don't just get thrown into the trash and given as free money to the university. Those should get automatically recycled into swipe to care, where people who need them can benefit from them. Last piece, and this one, unfortunately Giovanni's in DC on co-op, so he's not able to be here with us today, but personal passion of his, he's on the NUPD advisory board, and so we're both first responders in our free time, and he's been working with them on trying to improve relationships, and we want to continue that momentum. Things like the resource dogs, Cooper and Sarge, things like coffee chats, open forums. We want NUPD to be a more open place that students feel like they can go to when they have a problem, but it's not like the only time you're interacting with NUPD is when there's a problem, especially given all the things that happened earlier in the semester on campus with campus safety. We really want people to feel like campus is a safe place, but also a welcoming place in an open environment where there's kind of a back and forth relationship with NUPD that's a positive one. So that's kind of like our core. I know it's a bit long-winded, but our core platform rests on that, and also like using SGA as a vehicle to get those things done.
Yep, those are some great goals. Can I ask, why did you go into the election? When you first decided to run, you said you didn't have your set goals, you decided to go talk to groups.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you didn't have a set goal before you started your campaign?
Yeah, so I think, the set goal I'd say we did have was what I talked about earlier, which was like using SGA as a tool. We knew that something needed to change to get things done, but I really feel like I'm an individual. And the role of student body, it's not just SGA president, student body president, that's the title. It's not my place to decide, oh, these are the 6 things that we should be doing because these are the 6 things that affect me most personally and I think they're important. Like, if that's how everybody went, you would never find a president who would be, effective across the university. It would only be effective for really like-minded individuals. So we had a general idea of some of the things we wanted to do, but we really wanted to understand what is it that students actually want and how can we incorporate that into, the strategies, the connections that we already have from being an SGA and use that to create our goals and to formulate a plan on how we're going to get these things done. So I think it's that fundamentally we want things to be built from the ground up, from the students who make up the university, especially undergraduate students, which are who we represent. That's where the goals should be coming from. And if next year students don't care about some of these goals and they want something else done, that should be our mandate. We will shift to adapt to that because that's what's important, is making sure that we are adequately representing the students at the university.
So as you've mentioned, one of your main goals is to make the university, to make the SGA a tool to get things done for the university and for students. How would you go about changing that system in a way to make it a more effective tool?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And Giovanni and I have a lot of conversations about that. And typically, the president is more external facing and the EVP is more the internal facing of the SGA piece. But we've both been, thinking and putting together plans on how we want to really kind of shake SGA up and turn it on its head. SGA is bogged down in a lot of policy and procedure. I don't know for people who've gone to those meetings. I don't know if you have. They can be really long. They can be really tiresome. And a lot of that is just due to the way, these specific rules that we're following. We really think that it should not be that hard to join SGA. The meeting should be very open, very easy for people to come and talk, especially representatives from student groups. It shouldn't necessarily be, oh, you have to get, a certain number of signatures and that's the only way you're allowed to come talk and otherwise somebody, there should be a more open forum of places where if you're from a student group and you want to come talk to the student government, you have the ability to do that whenever you want. And it's a flexible, easy way for you to come share your opinions, share your thoughts. And from that, that's how we build our goals. Again, the mandate of, we're wanting to do what students want. That's how we think that should be done, by really making sure that it's accessible and easy to do, very flexible for student groups to be able to come and share their opinions, bounce them off of each other too, and have SGA kind of sitting there in the background. and willing to provide resources and help these student groups achieve what they need to be doing.
So off of that, you were talking about wanting to make things more accessible for students.
Yeah.
If you were to be elected as student body president, how would you make yourself available for general students or anyone else who has a question?
Yeah, so I actually think one of the ideas we've had is SGA has an office in Curry. Right now, it's really just kind of a workspace for people on the SGA e-board. They'll go in there, and it's nice to have a spot to work. But we really think that office should be reformatted in a way that it's more of a place that students can come when they have questions. So especially for clubs who are dealing with finance issues, because the finance board of SGA deals with club funding, or for the student involvement board, which I used to sit on, that deals with club recognition and integrating with CSI. It can be daunting if you're a club leader to go to the CSI office and try to ask them for something. SGA should be your first step, and how can we help you? How can we connect you with what you need to do? So a physical part of that is reformatting that office to make it so that it's an easy place for people to come in and ask us questions instead of just a workspace for people within SGA. From a larger standpoint, I think it's making sure all of our committee meetings are accessible, making sure that we're advocating and actually letting people know here are times that we have that you can come talk to us about your problems. If it's academics, personal problems, what have you been having issues with in classes? Are we noticing a trend between, you came in and talked to us about this week, somebody else talked to us about that last week? That might be a problem. We've done that on a small scale this year, and I've been trying to increase the outreach, but we're finding that surveys aren't the answer. People just don't love filling out surveys. It's hard to get people to really fill them out consistently. But having that ability to have an open forum, I think, is going to be really important, where people can actually come talk to us and share their concerns.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Can you tell me a little bit about both you and Giovanni's past experience on SGA? What have been your previous roles?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been SGA for 3 years. So my first year, I was a senator for DMSB. I'm a combined finance econ student. I also have a health science minor, but DMSB is my home school. So I represented the DMSB for my first year as a senator. My next year, my second year, actually that same year I served on the Student Involvement Board and in the Academic Affairs Committee. The next year I stayed on the Academic Affairs Committee and I became the Vice Chair of the Student Involvement Board, which deals with club recognition and helping new clubs and clubs who are updating their documents. So I got a lot of exposure to a lot of different clubs that way. Still working on the Academic Affairs Committee. We worked on a couple initiatives like the Trace for Co-op initiative, which should be going live soon. So similar to the Trace course evaluation program, this one would be for co-ops, so you can review your co-ops internally. And then this most recent year, I was elected VP for Academic Affairs, so I was leading the academics wing. So we built a textbook exchange network this year, specific for Northeastern students. You'll be able to sell your used books and buy used books from other students. One of the ways that we're trying to help reduce material costs for students, that'll go live in April, so just 2 weeks from now. We've also implemented a syllabi database proposal, which has gone to the Faculty Senate. So if you are registering for classes, hopefully it'll be implemented by the fall next year. That's our timeline right now. When you're registering for classes, you'll actually be able to see previous syllabi or expanded course explanations beyond what's on banner currently, specific to that professor in a specific course that you're looking at. So it's a couple of things I've done. I can't speak super extensively for Giovanni, but I know he's a year below me, so he's a second year. He was on Academic Affairs both years. He's the AVP for Academic Affairs this year, so he's been helping with some of those same initiatives. His first year, he was also the Faculty Senate representative. So he would go to the faculty, just like we have a student government, the faculty actually has a representative government as well. So he would go to those meetings and kind of report back and help push forward a lot of these initiatives, like the Trace for Co-op, like DEI questions on Trace, which exist now. He helped implement those as well.
Okay,
So,
and for our last question,
Yeah.
what do you think separates your campaign from your opponent's campaign?
I really think it's the actionable piece. Our whole thing has been we really want to get stuff done. We'd love to make large promises about widespread things on the university, but the reality is it is still student government. I'm a third year, I'm on a 4-year plan, so I'm only here for another year. We want to make sure that we're actually doing things that students will see the results of in that same year. So all those 6 points that we talked about, specific, measurable goals, that's really what we're all about. We want to make sure that what we're doing will actually be seen by students and that the students who are voting for us will benefit from them while they're still on campus. We want to still commit resources to long-term goals, but the way that we think the best way of doing that is by doing these measurable, specific actions to push us be on the track forward to these long-term goals. So, from the gym space piece, a long-term goal could be way more gym space on campus, more gyms on campus. If we go to the university right now and tell them to build more, it's not reasonable. But adding more space right now or adding more equipment right now is one way to do that, and then we use that momentum in the next year. Our successors could do that. But yeah, I think the big thing is we're very actionable. We're very focused on getting things done that same year, and that's what we hope to do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Can you tell me why you're running for student body president and executive vice president?
Sure. Hi, my name is Charlie. I use the he, him pronouns. I'm a third-year sociology and international business major. So as a third year now, let me just roll back until I started at Northeastern, right? So when I first came here from New Zealand as an international student, from a completely different academic and cultural environment, I'd just like to say that was, a huge change and transition into college for me personally. And that sense of belonging and that sense of inclusion was something that I just didn't have time to focus on, my wellness and mental health while trying to grapple with all the other changes happening at Northeastern, at college as a whole. So I joined SGA, as kind of like a place where I could learn more about going to college in the US and just learn a bit more about Northeastern. And through that experience, I not only got all of that out of SGA, but also got to help people with certain projects, got to tackle things that I'm passionate about, like food insecurity, for example. Something that I didn't have when I was a freshman on campus was like access to all the available foods in the dining halls because I had dietary restrictions. And so that led me to eating like white rice every single day in the dining halls for like 6 months straight, which wasn't great. But then I also learned that SGA had something called the Food Advisory Board. And now 3 years on, I'm lucky enough to chair that board, and we're working directly with the admin on restructuring meal plans and making those more affordable and more flexible for the students. So, standing here today, me and Maddie, we really wanted to run together. One, because we're best friends. Two, because we feel extremely passionate about passing on the knowledge and the relationships that we've gained for future students. And that leads me to we want to run because we want to make sure that there's permanent pathways and structures for future students to be able to utilize to complete whatever they're passionate about in their projects, because it's not really about us.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me having my soapbox too. Hi, I'm Maddie. I use any pronouns, so they, them, he, him, she, her. Take your pick, I do prefer they, them, but anything in the battery is fine. And I'm also a third year. I'm a psychology major. And what motivated me to run, going all the way back to my first year, again, is that when I was in high school, I guess this is before my first year, actually, I had what you could say amounted to a mental health crisis. It was not pretty, and I won't go into the details, obviously, but basically I was very fortunate to have access to a lot of resources and support systems that, just because I grew up in this very suburby bubble, felt very normal to me. But then I came to university, and it kind of was like a slap in the face to see that there are so many striations in terms of resource accessibility, not just in the way of mental health, which is of course when I first noticed it, but also in the way of sustainable practices and the accessibility of those, food, etc., low-cost housing. So kind of seeing that, I was kind of imbued with a passion and a desire to fix that, because it made me realize I was a super lucky individual, and I was going through a time of crisis, and the only reason I made it out of that was because I had these support systems. No one deserves to go through that sort of thing alone, regardless of what sector of their life the crisis is in. So I did a lot of advocacy with my niche, especially being in the mental health sphere throughout the past couple years. I helped see Lean On Me through to becoming an actual accredited organization at the university. Lean On Me is a non-crisis mental health hotline. Check us out on Instagram. And I also worked with Active Minds on various wellness initiatives, and I am the current student chair of the new Holistic Wellness Advisory Board, which brings together students from a bunch of different walks of life on campus to talk directly with University Wellness Administration about wellness initiatives and wellness programs on campus. So that's kind of my background, I guess. But my motivation for running is exactly what Charlie said. That's kind of what like raised me into the advocacy realm. And just continuing on that strain of like desiring to be an advocate for students, I want to see that infrastructure put in place so that future students can advocate for these things, the same way that I did, but hopefully with greater ease, because it wasn't easy and it was a struggle, and we want to make sure that it's more streamlined for those future students to be able to do it. And I just want to add, Charlie and I don't think that we're the final authority on anything. We recognize that like our perspectives are biased inherently. We can try as we might, we're always going to be muddied with like our past like experiences. And so because of that, our campaign is really all about delegating and getting as many voices to the table as possible, because productivity happens when you have as many people from as many backgrounds together.
So you're running as the Clean Slate, and where CLEAN is an acronym for 5 different goals. Can you walk me through what those goals are?
Sure, let me take the first 3. C stands for correcting club funding. Are you in a club by any chance?
I am.
Imagine if NUTV had easier access to apply for funding, to get more information out, so that we're all on an even playing field in terms of like what clubs we are and how that information is delivered and transparent. Because we see that there's 450 officially recognized clubs on campus, but there's huge discrepancies in the amount of knowledge that each individual club leader has for their club and funding aspect and on like an involvement aspect. So 2 of the goals that we want to achieve within that are working with the Student Finance Board to achieve like a standard response rate, so that like club leaders aren't left in the dark about certain issues. And another thing that we're working on right now is to try and establish a club support committee or hotline, if you will, to be like, if there are issues between clubs, we want to be there so that there's a designated group of people that can help at each and every club on campus. The second thing is lowering living costs. We talked about a little bit this already, but food insecurity is a huge issue that I've been very passionate about for the last 3 years. And something that we intend to see into fruition, into alleviating. And so we've been working with YDSA, with NU Mutual Aid on 3 things within that. One is to restructure the meal plans so that they're more affordable and more flexible, and to have a bigger incentive for students that are no longer on the meal plan to be able to afford cheaper meals on campus in the form of a discount. Another thing is we've been working on the swipe to care issue for a long time. It was never meant to be an end-all solution to food insecurity on campus, and it's not. But there are ways that we could definitely enhance that. For example, just this past semester, we expanded it to all students on campus, whereas previously it was only for undergrads. And now another thing we want to do is we're already in contact with Swipe to Care's office, which is WeCare, as well as like trying to develop the back end of it so that automatic donations are something that is possible in the near future. And then lastly, we want to create a permanent food pantry on campus. Again, NU Mutual Aid and us, we've been working really hard on that. I volunteer for them on Wednesdays. And so having like even a roof over our heads when we're doing this for the community would be really, really nice. Another thing that we all experience as students is the housing crisis, right? Whether we're trying to get on-campus housing or trying to find housing in the surrounding Boston area, which is the 2nd most expensive city to rent in the US right now. So it's definitely a huge issue. It's not something we can solve immediately. But we have started a new campus planning advisory board, and through that it allows students to have direct decision-making ability into how Northeastern designs its development plan for the next 10 years, which will include some aspect of affordable housing and sustainable development. And then the last acronym that I'm going to talk about is E, which is for elevating equity and inclusion. And we intend to do that by supporting existing projects that are going on in SGA. One of them is the establishment of a women's center in conjunction with like the Harvard Women's Center and the Office for DEI. That's something that we've been working with affinity groups and something that we feel really passionate about pushing forward. Another thing is there's a lot of cases in student conflict where it's not covered by formal processes through OSCAR or through OEC or through Title IX. And we want to work with OPEN and SARC and a lot of other organizations to kind of formalize alternative student conflict resolution methods. The big one being restorative justice practices and having like an office dedicated to restorative justice and making that a pathway that's open for students in these situations.
Okay, yeah, so before I get into the A and the N pillars of Clean Slate, I just want to give a little adage to what Charlie was talking about with elevating equity and inclusion. This isn't just going to be an external thing for us. We also recognize that there are some hiccups in SGA with regards to internal DEI, and we really want to remedy those and take a proactive approach in ensuring that there aren't any like issues that arise in the future by completely like renovating the internal DEI infrastructure in the SGA, making sure that there are like accountability protocols, and also making sure that from the gate, our STEP program, which is our senatorial training program, has these has very robust like DEI training. So that's something that right out the gate we're going to look into, and that's the TLDR on that. As for the A stands for accountable administration. And that is kind of, I guess you could say, the crux of our campaign. It's kind of the theme that ties across. So our vision is, again, creating these systems whereby future students can continue to meet regularly with administration in order to propel the initiatives that they see fit throughout the university. And the means that we see going about that is by creating and enhancing existing systems, such as like boards and advisory groups that we've already created and happen to be chairing at the moment. So for example, the campus, I think it's the Campus Planning Advisory Board? Yeah, the Campus Planning Advisory Board to deal with housing issues and continue to work directly with the housing office to mitigate anything that might arise in the future. The Holistic Wellness Working Group to, again, continue forwarding, calling attention to, and workshopping issues regarding holistic wellness at the university. The Food Advisory Board to address food insecurity. I could go on. Oh, NUTV Advisory Board, that's another one. I could go on, but in effect, the theme here is that we plan to create these systems whereby the university admin agrees to meet with students on a regular basis, face-to-face, be it virtual or in person, so that students can say, hey, this is something that we want to see done, this is something that we need to see done, we want you to look into this, we want you to come back to us. And then by having that sort of institutionalized on a regular basis, we think that we can successfully hold the admin accountable to those sorts of initiatives. Moving on to the N, which is my favorite. N stands for, just because it's my niche, not because it's any more important than anything, just because, yeah, it's my niche. N stands for normalized wellness and mental health. And so that ties into a lot of the work that I've personally been doing and a lot of the work that organizations that I've had my foot in are doing, and just, again, continuing to like expand that and enhance it, make it more accessible. So for example, like enhancing the knowledge of wellness resources on campus via working with the Holistic Wellness Working Group, refining these student-run wellness resources such as Lean On Me, and just like continuing to make sure that the awareness, accessibility, and enhancement of these resources is ongoing.
Okay, and for our last question, what do you think sets you apart from the other slate currently running for student body president and executive vice president?
Sure, I can start with, as Maddie mentioned before, we're trying to set up these permanent structures, right? Because we know that our ideas are not the final say in any of these subjects that we're talking about. We want to elevate other students and make their voices heard directly to the administration, and we want to sidestep that traditional Northeastern shuffle process. And we're going to do that by using all these boards that we've already piloted and already created to essentially have direct student input in a lot of the decisions that directly affect all of us, right? So instead of talking about the issues that we want to change. We're talking about the issues that other students want to change, and we will help them get there. Another thing is kind of the SGA culture itself, and I think, Maddie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I, especially as someone who's more on the outside now, I think that SGA is creating barriers to entry by just giving this air of like hyper-professionalism and almost like a little bit of like stuffiness. And like we're kind of, I think Charlie and I, because of our synergy, especially as people who have been like best friends for like so long, I think that we can kind of turn that energy on its head and make it a more welcoming place by just making it a more low-key, a more fun place. And that's not to say that, you know, any of the issues we're addressing aren't serious. That's just to say that we don't necessarily need to take ourselves as seriously, you know, in order to get things done. And I think more people will want to get things done if we make it a little more fun.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for speaking with me.